Welcome to Climate Channel, Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury, Climate Action Pathways, episode 47. So in this episode, we are pleased to have conversation with our former SBI chair and Substar chair, Paul Witkinson, who was in the COP presidency team in COP21, which had crafted the landmark Paris Agreement in 2015. So he had a lot of wealth of experience in shaping, crafting the Paris Agreement in 2015. And now we are in the run-up to COP26 to help implement Paris Agreement and also frame the rule of the Paris Agreement. Rule Article 6 negotiation is on how to have the rules for market mechanism, non-market mechanism, and a lot more. How to set adaptation goal, how to fix definition of adaptation, and also loss and damage, climate finance, $100 billion per annum goal. Those, and also as per IPCC AR 6 assessment report of Working Group 1 summary, they have red alert, issued red alert. So to keep 1.5 degree Paris Agreement global goal of temperature reaching rise alive, we need to speed up. We need to have a robust architecture rule book to help implement Paris Agreement. Without much ado, I would now like to ask Paul to share your reflection, your expectation, how you have crafted, craft Paris Agreement, and how to best it can be implemented, and also 1.5 degree temperature rise regime can that goal live alive. Paul.
Oh, yes, hello, and thank you, Quamrul. I'll give you some reflections on this, but please interrupt me and drive me in the direction you want. I speak too long too easily. I think the experience we had as a I'm very happy this year. I no longer have a leading role. I'm not running the French delegation this year. I'm not part of a presidency as I was in 2015. I don't have the chair of Substar anymore, which I had in 2018 and 2019. So I have a slightly easier time, I hope, than all those who have to take on those responsibilities this year. I can be a little bit detached from it, though I will be continuing to advise and assist the French delegation throughout the coming weeks. I think in terms of the experience we drew from Paris and how that can be relevant for COP26 coming up, it's clear there were many things that we learned as a presidency at the time which remain relevant for any presidency running a conference. I think for me, one of the first is to be very conscious of the need to listen to all parties and their concerns. No presidency is ever neutral. All parties come from a background, have their interests, they don't disappear, but the impartiality with the way which you run a process and the ability to listen to everybody around the table, even if you may not necessarily agree, that everybody's views have to be heard, everyone's views have to be taken on board. And at the end, the results you get, they need to make a coherent package so that everybody can feel they own enough in that package for it to be something they want. I often felt that a good test when you're thinking about what the result should be is to try and write the sort of press conference of each minister from each country. Because if there are some who come to that meeting and they say, well, in the end, I didn't get very much, there isn't any ambition, there isn't any finance, there isn't any action happening, why should I accept the result? And I think that's relevant. It was relevant in Paris when we tried to seek the balance which is there within the Paris Agreement between the different parts and the interests of all the almost 200 countries which are parties to the convention that needed to be found to make that balance. And I think it will be relevant to the UK presidency in running the conference in Glasgow, although the challenges they face are different from the ones we faced in Paris. In Paris, we were trying to agree a legal treaty text, and that was the focus of almost all of the work, although other things were, of course, going on. Whereas I think if you look at Glasgow, it's about the ambition of action, particularly with the presence of leaders at the start. How much can that drive that ambition up from the unfortunately too low level it is today? But it's about delivery in terms of the action, but also, of course, the finance and the support, which is so important for not just the delivery and the action being possible for particularly support to developing countries, but it's also the credibility of the process, delivery, meeting, respecting what's been promised. But it's also all the different initiatives that can be taken forward, which can complement the level of ambition and drive action in very many different domains. That's not a negotiated outcome mainly, but I think it's a very important complementary part of that. The action agenda we had in Paris, the campaigns, the different terms the UK is using, I never remember what they are, but the action on coal, action on vehicles, action on many different fields, that matters. Because it helps drive us forward in the real world and make the link to the many actors, not just states. And then it's finalizing the implementation texts of Paris and taking those forward. That's an important part of the equation. What's interesting is that it's probably not the key part, because the most important part is the ambition and the delivery, I think, this time. And the danger is, of course, that there is a gap there between what is needed and the 1.5 degrees that we need, not to stop climate change, because unfortunately climate change, even at 1.5 degrees, is going to be dangerous and with many, many impacts, particularly for countries such as your own, which are amongst the most vulnerable. But it's making sure that we can at least limit to that level. Now then, how can that then be taken forward? And I think there's an open question there. How can that be built through the results of Glasgow to ensure that even if the level of ambition is not fully on the table, my own sense is it won't be, unfortunately, how you can still use the mechanisms of the Paris Agreement, the collaboration and the political pressure which is built up to ensure that we get there despite that.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right that this time the Atlantic gap between, say, ambition and also the current position, say, a huge gap. How to minimize that gap, and who are going to fill that gap by raising their own, say, NDC ambitions. Say their mitigation ambitions, their even climate finance ambition, even adaptation ambitions. So these are the key questions have to be answered by the political leaders, especially leaders of G7 countries, G20 countries. So pressure is on them. So how that pressure yield some concrete positive results in terms of, say, reducing that Atlantic gap. You are absolutely right. But for that, we need to also hammer on. We need to also pursue our leaders. And you have heard IPCC report. They are quite loud and clear. They have made the clarion call. Say they bang the red alert, and also United Nations Secretary General, he also called up, and also various leaders of most vulnerable countries, they are also trying to push for that. But see, all said and done, it depends on a few leaders, especially leaders like Joe Biden, leaders like, say, Boris Johnson, and also your own president. They can also new German chancellor, if he or she comes in, they have to also try to have, say, newer vision for 1.5 degrees. How to translate that into action, into commitment, into also reality, and above all, not only in Glasgow a declaration, but also returning back home, it should be enshrined in their legislation, domestic, say, for USA Congress, Senate, say for UK, say House of Commons, and also say uh, House of Lords, they have to take that in, and also EU Parliament, they should also have that legal basis, so that implementation is quite smooth. And also climate finance is also a huge challenge. How to reduce that gap, and also accessibility of the fund, whatever the fund is available, say delivery of that, accessibility of that. At times it requires 2 to 3 years, even after approval of the project of a Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund or say Least Developed Country Fund, to access that resources from that field. So these are the key questions now we are confronting before Glasgow, at Glasgow, and how best that can be. So what is your prudent thought?
Well, there's a great deal in there, and I think it's the fact, as usual, the COP is a place where many things come together. Sometimes we almost expect too much of one meeting, even though it's in many ways many meetings following each other. But I think you're right in many of the things you just put forward. First, we have the science. And I think it is vital that the science continues to underpin and inform everything we do. The report of Working Group 1 of the IPCC is a vital input. I have one problem in messages I've seen on that, is I've seen a lot of people, including even the Secretary General of the UN, talk about it as a wake-up call. I don't think it's a wake-up call. I think we had a wake-up call 20, 30 years ago. We've been having a wake-up call for a long time. It's a bit like one of those mornings when you don't want to wake up and you keep on pressing the snooze button on the alarm, and it keeps on going off, and you try and turn over and hide your head under the blanket and pretend you don't have to get up. Whereas unfortunately, we've been given this warning many, many times. It's not new. What's in the latest IPCC report, I find it's a bit like getting a much clearer screen. Everything is much more in detail, much sharper, much clearer. But the message ultimately is that this is an extremely serious issue. It's real, it's happening now, it's going to get a lot worse. We can do something about it. And I think it'll be very important next year when we get the reports of Group 2 on impacts and vulnerability, and of course Group 3 looking very much at the mitigation and the action side, how we can use those. That'll be after COP26, but I think those will be particularly important in driving the type of action and how we can use it. We need to use the science, but for a long time we've known the science, and we said thank you, and we've carried on. We can't do that any longer, and I think that's clear. We do need the leaders of the largest countries to step up clearly. The G20 is a key institution, and it will be meeting just before Glasgow opens. So, I mean, let's hope there will be some further news from that. We just had a few days ago, very welcome update of the NDC from South Africa, which I think was good news. Further updates would obviously be helpful, and it's clear the largest countries, the biggest emitters, make the biggest difference. But at the same time, you can't just pull fingers out of the air. They have to be built on real internal studies, policies, and having that matters. And the value of the COP is that it is a multilateral process. It's where all parties come together.
Yeah.
It's not only the largest emitters. Otherwise, we could leave this to the G20. But I think particularly yourself from Bangladesh, from a vulnerable country, which is particularly concerned by that, others in similar situations, the voices of all countries are heard in the COP. That's the big difference between it and the smaller clubs. And that's where we all have to come together to reach agreements. Now, then, as someone who for many years spoke on behalf of Europe, and then as a French member delegate, defending my own national interests throughout the years, I will, of course, emphasize that at the European level, work on preparing the implementation package for our -55 target is underway. The Fit for 55 package is there. I hope very much it needs to be put on the legislation agreed, or the detailed next year, early next year. It's a priority, but it's vital that we get the ambition, but we also get all the things to implement it, because that's what makes the difference again. And then we can talk about strengthening that further. It's a set of steps we are going up. We're unlikely to jump up to the top step straight away, but we need to be much further than we currently are, and we need to make sure those steps are solid, so that when we walk on them and we build on them. Sorry, the metaphors are always dangerous, as we said at the start, but we're able really to build on them and take it forward. And so all of these pieces need to be there. I'm very conscious, and again, I spent many years negotiating on behalf of the Union issues around finance, including in Copenhagen and Cancun, when we put together a decision on creating the green fund and related issues. I'm very conscious of these issues as being a vital part of the bargain we made that needs to be kept. It's part of the bargain in Paris, and it is a vital part of delivery for many countries. I'm also conscious that traditional north-south climate finance is nowhere near enough and will not be enough to finance the transformation which is going to be needed in all countries, of the economies, the developed clean energy systems, infrastructure, but also adaptation. And this will need much wider transformation of finance. It's, again, having the right policies in place, having the right frameworks in place, but the actual climate finance which has been promised and which needs to be delivered is vital to unblock much of that. And we need to make sure that that is used in the wisest way to have that impact. So I appreciate we unfortunately are running behind. Many of us have been raising the climate finance we're delivering. I can say that from a French position, most definitely. My colleagues at the French Development Agency, l'AFD, have been working hard on that delivery. Many others are working, but collectively we haven't got there yet. And that is a matter of trust and of delivery, which is to be addressed. I think it's welcome to hear the US president announce a doubling of US finance, and after several years when that was lacking, that's good to have that coming in. Of course, seeing that and the exact timing and how that will be delivered, particularly in a US legislative setting, is important. But I trust them to deliver. But of course, we all want to see the delivery now, and I think that's not just developing countries, but I think other developed countries want to see delivery because it's there. And then, of course, we need to work together around the specific tools we can have. That's where cooperation is so vital. Cooperation can be through many of these specific initiatives. We can work together, not necessarily all countries, but those who have a real interest in delivering. But it's also around the tools. I mean, that's where Article 6 of the Paris Agreement can be an important part of the process. One, because it unblocks that possibilities for parties to exchange the mitigation outcomes, as they were called under the Paris Agreement. Now, then, I'm not someone who thinks that the market is a solution to everything by any means. And I think there are places it's valuable and places it needs to be used very carefully. But I'm conscious that if we're going to use it, it needs to be a credible carbon market. And for me, that's the key thing about Article 6. When I was chair of Substats for 2 years, I had the oversight of those negotiations. And a lot of it is about getting the detailed rules in place so that the accounting is correct. The accounting is robust, you avoid double counting, you keep environmental integrity of what goes on. You then have a mechanism which can be very useful for the concrete collaboration between countries around specific projects and delivering and encouraging finance and to come in on those. So these tools, if they're well designed, can be very positive. If they're badly designed, unfortunately, they can undermine the system. And I think that's the challenge we've been having on that particular topic. Cooperation is necessary. Tools such as that can help facilitate it, and in particular to drive finance in the right direction, and including the private sector to take an interest and to put its money into those projects. But if it's wrongly set up, it can simply be an illusion. And that's something we need to all to be very careful of.
Excellent. Paul, you have been quite a long in this process, and as you also mentioned that even when IPCC was set up and its meeting in the late 80s, it also warned at that time. So warning is not a new one, it is on. It was bolstered every time, even before say Paris Agreement in 2015, AR5 report came out, and there was a lot of say sensitization. But now I would like to ask you a very personal question. How you came to this world, came to the climate parlance, climate negotiation, who have taught you, say, environmental issues, climate change issues, who are your gurus, even in climate negotiation, who are your, say, mentors? You would say role model. Say I always fondly remember Ambassador Raul Estrada, or even Thomas Becker of say Denmark, though he was not in say Copenhagen at the last moment, but because of him, say we were for Copenhagen summit. He was instrumental, or Connie Hedegaard later on took over. They were friends, close friends. Say Ambassador Dasgupta, or many people, even Dan of United States. These people were at times, say, superstars of climate negotiations. So who are your, say, role model or say your gurus, and try to influence you to be in environmental field, environmental negotiation, climate change negotiation, sustainable development negotiations, desertification negotiations, or biodiversity negotiation, or other environmental treaty negotiations?
Okay, I haven't prepared this one, so I'll give you a short answer, and I don't want to. I mean, I came into this having already worked on sustainable development and environmental and some climate policy for a number of years. But I started being very active in the climate negotiations from the year 2000. It was the year of the Hague conference, which was not the best of my places to begin.
He has broken his
But it was certainly a very strong learning process. It was also the moment when France had
COP26 in Bonn.
But it was a year when France had its presidency of the European Union in that second half of 2000. So we were running the European Union. So I found myself thrown in very much into the coordination, into the negotiation of a number of issues directly, and to trying to keep an overview of that. And I was very encouraged in that. And given a lot of responsibility by Michel Mouzel, who was at that point the president Interministerial Task Force on Climate Change in France. Sadly, he died last year. And
our condolence.
But he's someone who made a real difference over many years to action on national environmental and sustainable development policy, but particularly making a link to the social side and a very strong understanding of the link to development. And that wasn't always on the table, particularly from a European point of view. When we went to those meetings at that stage at around about 2000 or a bit before or a bit after, it tended to be a different viewpoint. So I found that something which helped me a great deal getting into this process, to be given that viewpoint, and I've kept it because I'm very conscious we cannot treat this as an environmental problem. This is about the very nature, not like the Montreal Protocol, where we're dealing with some industrial gases coming from a small number of sites for a very specific set of uses. We're dealing with something which is about the whole nature of the way our societies and our economies work, and have done for decades or even centuries now. Changing that is difficult, and the multilateral system has to be part of that. So I think I've learned from many people over the years. I won't try and list individuals. I think that would be unfair. But it's certainly, I think, a process where all of us learn from each other. And I think if one of the key things is to build bridges beyond our own groups and our own parties. I've seen some people, and I can remember early on meeting someone who said, "Oh, I didn't know I could talk to developing countries." And I said, "What?" No, of course, the whole point about a negotiation, this is someone within the European Union, is you need to understand the interests and the concerns of everyone in the room. You can't find a deal simply by being concerned by my own interests. And one of the problems I found as a European is we often spend far too long talking amongst ourselves before talking to the others. And so that ability to build bridges, to reach out, to talk to everyone from every group, including the ones which you may have big disagreements, they're the only ways to find solutions, because unless you talk to the people with whom you disagree, you can't solve things. And I think climate change is such a big problem. The purity of staying in your own camp is meaningless. We all have to be listening to everyone else in the room to find solutions so that everyone can come on board. And sometimes those compromises can be weaknesses in the process compared to a perfect system, but they're making sure the process is moving forward. The challenge is to make sure we're not taking it too slowly, and that's where sadly we're still going too slowly. So I don't know if I've only half answered a tiny bit of your question.
Thank you very much. I still fondly remember in 91, 92, when we were crafting the conventions, then Vice Lalonde from France, he was very active at that time. Even German Minister Klaus Stroffer, he was leading the European group of countries as lead negotiator at the time at the ministerial setting. So we had very fond memories of those years. These people help craft the three conventions, Rio conventions, and in Rio also they were quite active. So these people, I fondly remember them, and they have a lot of contributions, especially to sensitize us, train us, groom us. That way they will be remembered fondly. So thank you very, very much, Paul, for sharing your take, your reflection, your journey along the Paris Agreement, and also now on our road to Glasgow COP26. So hopefully COP26 will be a successful one. And with that positive note, we would like to end this episode, 47th episode of Climate Channel, Climate Conversation with Quamrul Chowdhury. Thank you very, very much, Paul Witkinson, again for sharing your reflection, your thoughts, your expectation, and also your experience, wealth of experience in Climate Channel. Thank you. It was our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quamrul, and I totally share your hope that we will have a success in Glasgow, which will certainly put us on the pathway to keep to 1.5. I mean, that's what we need. We may not get everything there, but we certainly need to be able on the pathway. I think that's, people have understood this now. That's vital. Good luck.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks.